Hello, everybody, and welcome to This.JavaScript State of Browsers. Excited to be here today. We have a really nice program set up. I wanted to quickly share a few things. My name's Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. Always happy to talk about exciting things happening on the web. I'm also joined by one of my a special invited guest and somebody who's going to be asking all the amazing panel questions. Amal. Hi, Amal.
Hi, Tracy. Looking forward to cornering the web later.
Yes, it's going to be really fabulous. But anyways, I'm sharing my, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay.
See the
Yeah, so this.JavaScript, the reason why we do these events, we actually do this twice a year, State of Browsers. And the whole idea is basically being able to keep up with all the amazing features that are coming out, what everyone on the web is doing, and kind of just, share and have a consolidated way of not scrolling through Twitter and desperately trying to figure out what the new stuff is. We have a few upcoming events happening. So we have GraphQL Contributor Days, which is going to be enterprise focused. That's actually tomorrow. That is going to be from 11 to 3 Pacific Standard Time. And this is actually a really amazing event because, there's going to be something like 20 to 25 people who are working on GraphQL or who have adopted it within their companies, and talking through use cases, challenges, things that are awesome, et cetera, et cetera. So it's open to everybody, and you can check that out. Same thing, we also have Modern Web Online. That's going to happen starting next week. And we're going to be having talks on GraphQL. We'll also be having a talk about accessibility, and then another talk about edge cases and why they're important for our industry. So check that out when you can. Today is State of Browsers. We have two folks from Microsoft who are going to give a State of Edge. So Stephanie will be leading this, and she's a program manager for Edge at Microsoft. We also have Aaron, and Aaron is a web standards advocate at Microsoft. So if you have any questions about Edge, there is also a live chat that you can drop in any questions at any given time. Brian Cardell is also joining us from Egalia, and he's going to be giving us an update on what they are doing with WebKit. We also have Riju Brata, who is a software engineer at Intel, and going to be speaking to us about the different collaborations that are happening within how they're collaborating with the different browsers. Diego as well is a project manager at Samsung and is going to be speaking about what Samsung is doing. I already mentioned Amal. She's a senior open web engineer at Bocoup. So love everything that you're doing, Amal, within the community. Jonathan will be joining us. He does DevRel over at Brave and giving us an update on all the exciting stuff happening with the Brave browser. Paul as well is a senior developer advocate at Google, and he's going to be giving us an update on everything that's happening in Chrome. And again, my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet, and I'm always happy to answer any questions at all. This is definitely hiring. I feel like I'm a broken record saying, we're hiring again. Can we stop hiring? But we're growing. So if you want to work on cool stuff related to Angular, React, Vue, Node, or Polymer, always happy to check. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. And first up, we are going to have Stephanie give us an update on the State of Edge. So Stephanie, I'll let you take it away.
Alrighty, let me share my screen here. Can everyone see my slides?
We have the black screen again.
Okay. Let me try one more time.
While you're sharing, Stephanie, so your Twitter handle is COtta.
Yes.
So I think like Sea Otter, but I also think Seattle because you live in Seattle.
Right.
So what is it?
It's Sea Otter.
Okay. But every time I see C, I'm like, oh, Seattle, of course, Anyways. Okay, we can see your screen now. It's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty, so hi everyone, my name is Stephanie. Like Tracy said, I'm a program manager and a designer for the dev tools at Microsoft. And I'm going to give you your quick 5-minute update on what's new with Edge. And there's actually quite a bit if you're not aware. So we have officially adopted Chromium. And that actually means lots of good stuff for all of our users. So we're now able to deliver and update the browser across all supported versions of Windows. Eventually, that'll be cross-platform on Mac OS. And this also means that we're able to update the browser more frequently. So we're not tied to the operating system anymore, which was actually a huge point of feedback from folks over the years. So that's super exciting for us. It also means that we're more compatible with all your websites because the browser will always be up to date regardless of the platform or operating system you're on. And then we just want to reiterate too that even though we've adopted Chromium, we're still committed to an open web and evolving web standards. So we will be contributing all of our web platform enhancements back to the Chromium project by default. And then since we announced our move in December to Chromium, we've landed over 400 commits into the project already, which is awesome. Our team has been hard at work. Right now, we're focused on improving the Windows experience because that's our area of expertise. And we're also focused on making improvements in accessibility, localization. So we're localizing the dev tools, scrolling and touch. In regards to accessibility, there's lots of good stuff happening. And if you're not aware, so the current version of Edge on Edge HTML is the only browser to get a perfect score on HTML5accessibility.com. So we're working hard to try and bring all those improvements back to Chromium. And so just lots of good stuff. Right now, we have our Canary and Dev channels available for preview for Windows 10. I'll share the URL where you can go download a preview at the end of this slideshow. Canary updates daily, Dev updates weekly. And then let's see, moving right on into web apps. So we now support pure web standard cross-platform installable progressive web apps directly from the browser. We're also working with the web standards community to bring capabilities that you love back to web standards. And last week at Build, we announced our new web view that'll be available for Win32 and UWP apps, and that'll give you the option of an evergreen Chromium platform via Edge, or the option to bring your own version for AppCompat via a model that's similar to Electron. So lots of good stuff there too. And then my personal favorite, because this is my area of expertise, dev tools. We've got new dev tools in the browser, and they are visually aligned with VS Code, which includes dark mode on by default. We've had lots of good feedback about that, which I'm super excited about. Right now, we're working our way through a lot of other UI updates. So we're updating things like controls, inputs, and we're also looking for more ways to align the experience between your browser dev tools and VS Code. And we're also looking to where we can align with the Fluent design system as well. So lots of good stuff there. And then the built-in tools can now inspect and debug any Microsoft Edge powered web content, which includes the browser, PWAs, or even WebView. And that experience is going to be consistent across all those targets. One thing the team is really passionate about right now is getting people's feedback. So we want to build a browser that people want to use and that has the features that people want. So we are hungry for your feedback. If you love something, if you hate something, we want to know. Once you go download the preview, you can submit feedback via the little smiley icon that's in the tab bar, or you can always tweet us at MSEdgeDev. We're super active on Twitter. So you can go download the preview today at MicrosoftEdgeInsider.com. That's for Windows 10 only right now. If you're interested in Windows 7 or Mac OS, You can also go to that URL and be notified when those previews are available, coming soon. Don't have a date yet. And if you're not aware, we are already on iOS and Android, so you can go download us there too. And that is what's new with Microsoft Edge.
So many exciting things happening, especially with Build. Yes, last week, and Paul, you had I/O last week. So a lot of amazing things. Thanks so much for sharing. Again, feel free to ask Stephanie any questions. Amal, did you have any comments before we move on to Paul?
I don't, except for I never thought I'd live to hear the day that, Edge would be available on iOS. And it's really, I think, exciting in some respects. So congratulations. I'm going to save my questions till the end, but thank you, Tracy.
Nice, no problem. Cool. Well, Paul, we'll go ahead and let you get set up and give you a state of Chrome.
I actually do have a question before we start. Is it going to be available on Linux? I mean, I asked because I use a Chromebook as my main machine at the moment. And so you could, with Crostini, I can run Firefox. It'd be killer if we could run Internet Explorer as well. I'm presuming.
So we don't have any plans right now for Linux, but we've had lots of requests and interest in it. So I think we're starting to look at it, but we don't have any official plans.
Got it. It'd be really cool. It's just that I'm using my Chromebook more and more, or pretty much all the time now. And so, I don't know. It'd be cool. Cool. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Is that okay? Sweet. Okay, I'll get started. So, yeah, I'm Paul. I lead our Chrome developer relations team. We did have I/O last week. Yeah, it was last week. My mind has gone crazy. We had I/O last week. What I'm going to run through is a bit of kind of the stuff that we kind of talked about, because at I/O we tried to set out our kind of some of our roadmap for next year as well. And so I kind of want to run through that, where kind of what we're doing and what we're going and kind of what we're working on and some of the focus there. There's probably a few questions at the end, probably with some of the things that, especially around things like portals, which kind of was in the news the other day. We have this kind of focus of the last year and this next year around kind of three roughly kind of core areas of our investments in Chrome and inside the web platform around kind of instant experiences. One second. Oh, you can't see, it's fine. My room is about to go dark, but I'm not presenting, it's fine. We have instant experiences. There's powerful experiences, which are kind of the Fugu piece, which I think is going to be talked about in another talk later on. But also quickly go through that. And we've also announced some changes to the kind of, not the security model of the web, but some of the changes that we're making inside Chrome, especially with around cookies, which are going to be important over the long term. Which I'll talk about as well. So there's kind of those three core areas. That's our kind of area of focus for the last year and also for the next year ahead as well. So in terms of kind of web performance, one of the things that we were talking about at I/O is that the size of the kind of the web and the problem of the kind of the general websites and the performance websites isn't going away. Generally, we've seen a 6 seconds until you kind of get something on the screen, 9 seconds for kind of the average site. It gets up to about 27 seconds before sites are interactive for the 90th percentile. And so it's a pretty crazy situation. So there's a number of things that we've been doing on Chrome and inside the web platform broadly. We've been making a whole bunch of improvements to kind of V8 and a whole bunch of other stuff. And this is kind of roughly the scale of the problem. I won't go into too much, but there's a number of things that we're working on inside kind of the web platform ecosystem, which we were previewing at I/O. They're behind general kind of flags at the moment. The first was like the introduction of this idea of like lazy loading attribute. The idea behind this is to get you to remove or help you remove JavaScript, kind of like the lazy loading JavaScript that you have on today, which generally improves the performance of sites, but it still isn't the kind of, it still adds an extra lot of JavaScript, which blocks the rendering of the page. And so we introduced this idea of a lazy loading attribute or loading attribute, which, right now is behind the flag. And it works on images, and it'll also work on iframes. And so like one of the ideas behind this is like if you have a YouTube embed on your page, it's like it slows down your page quite a lot. And so the idea behind it is that you could put this attribute on your page, on your iframe, and as the user scrolls into view, or the element nearly into view, we then start to load all the JavaScript behind it that's required off behind that. It's the same for images. And one of the things that we've seen a huge kind of general performance increase when we've seen kind of sites, or in our trials at least, starting to use this. So it's pretty interesting. It's in the platform feature that we've we've worked with on the standard side of things a little bit. There's still some work to do on that side of things, but it's not generally available to the web platform. But it's where we've been putting a number of our investments. And the second and probably the most kind of interesting and contentious one at the same time was this idea of portals. It's not actually available in Chrome on the Chrome, the public Chrome. It's behind a flag still in Canary. But the idea behind the portals is like we want to enable kind of seamless transitions between two websites, and we also want to enable kind of single page application kind of architectures, but with a multi-page app kind of architecture at that point as well. And so the idea behind the portals is it's like essentially an iframe, but you can kind of control the calling page and the called page a little bit more closely. And it's there to actually enable you to say, also update the actual URL. Whereas if you have like something like an iframe, the URL doesn't change once you've actually made that iframe full screen. With the portal, the idea behind it is that you activate that page, and then that becomes the new URL essentially inside the address bar. And so one of the examples that we tried to show in I/O is, I think, Hatena. There's an experiment at the moment. It's not live and public just yet. But the idea is that this is actually a multi-page application where you can kind of preview the next page and then click on it, and then it loads in. And the idea behind this is that the URL and the attribution model will change as and actually then lands on the platform. But the idea behind this is that we know that loading performance is a big issue on the web, but also the transition between two sites and two pages is also a big issue that developers are forced into building single page applications. We don't necessarily think that you should have to make that choice between a multi-page app and a single page app to get the same type of navigation. We've also done a whole bunch of extra work inside Lighthouse. So Lighthouse version 5 got launched, and so that's kind of our tool, and that's integrated into Chrome DevTools. It goes out, analyzes your site, and tells you kind of what you can do and what you can work on and improve. But we also introduced on the command line side of things this idea of budgets, and we would like developers to be able to focus on basically setting out constraints of what they know that they can ship to the user in terms of the amount of JavaScript, the amount of CSS, maybe even images as well, to basically say that, well, I'm going to ship this change. We're going to make a pull request inside your kind of continuous integration environment. You could run Lighthouse, and if Lighthouse detects that any of your kind of page assets or your page performance drops, then you can then do things like break the build. And so you can do different types of resources and assets. So images, JavaScript, CSS, anything that goes above your budget, which will ultimately slow down your page, you can then basically tell your development team, hey, you need to go off and improve this and fix this because it's going to break the site. I'm going to quickly jump into some of the powerful stuff. There's a number of APIs that have landed. I think the interesting thing about this is we do, and we would like to see the continued kind of increase of capability on the web platform. You should be able to do everything a native app can do, essentially, but do it in a way that is kind of respectful of the origin model of the web, basically, and the security and the privacy model as well. The two biggest ones for me, at least anyway, based off kind of my longer history with Web Intents, is the Web Share API. You can now share from a web page pretty much on any platform to a native app, but also now you can get your web application deeply integrated into the kind of the system functionality. And the idea behind this with the Web Share Target API is that in this demo, this is the Twitter progressive web app, which can integrate with the kind of the underlying operating system and say, well, if a user wants to share an image or a link, or anything kind of in that way, you can actually then like share it from one web page or even a native application into your web app. And I think this, for me, this is just one of the more powerful pieces of the web platform, is that you now have that kind of distribution model of a link that you can give to anyone and then have it run anywhere, but actually have the operating system hooks that you kind of users expect from applications. The broader piece around kind of capabilities is there is an internal project. We didn't really want the name to get out originally, but it's called Fugu. And so it did get out. And so if you're ever looking for it on the Chromium bug tracker, you'll be able to look for kind of, all the issues tagged with Fugu. But the idea is that there's a whole set of APIs that we want to enable for kind of desktop productivity class applications, I think is the easiest way of saying it. So we've started off with some things like, image capture. Obviously there's an image capture API, but imaging clipboard, unlimited quota, icon badging, those types of things. There's a whole set of APIs that we want to try and do as well to enable seamless access to kind of like authentication as well as the easiest way of saying it. We know that like a number of sites in India need SMS access for verifying like one-time passwords. We're not going to give SMS availability to applications, but the one-time password piece of that actually is something that we want to enable on the web platform. So we kind of working in the standards group, the standard space there, to actually kind of get that API ready and available for users across the web. I think there'll be another talk about this a little bit later on, which will go into more depth. But we did try to set out a roadmap of the kind of the timelines for some of these features kind of coming out. And if you're interested, like I said, the Project Fugu is the kind of the interesting space. The other thing that we did in terms of capability is that we've been investing a lot of time in the lower end smart feature phone, we call them. So KaiOS in particular. We're trying to work out how you can build experiences that work well across all platforms, from super small feature phones all the way up to kind of the desktop experience. And so we launched a game. It's prox.app. The idea behind it is you can kind of get to the first screen within 20 kilobytes and get the full game within 100 kilobytes and have it work across all different form factors. And so like that's another area where we're putting a lot of investment in, just because we know that there's a lot of users who are coming online for the first time, and they have phones that are smart and powerful, but they don't have a touchscreen. And so we're doing a lot of work in that space as well. And I think the final set of things are around safety. So we talked quite a lot IO, and we're still doing a lot more work in this space about WebAuthn. So basically that's kind of like fingerprint and other biometrics being available to websites. The idea behind this is that you don't actually give your fingerprint to the website. You give like a secure cryptographic token to the website based off your fingerprint or some other kind of identifier. And we've actually seen a good number of sites launch with this. So like the idea behind, well, in this one, the piece of news was Yahoo Japan launched with WebAuthn access, and they reduced the time to sign in by about 38% in the end, so we think that's good. There's a lot more work to go on in this space. I know a couple of other browsers, I think Edge and probably Firefox, also have this built in as well. But we definitely want to see the web community move towards this kind of like second factor authentication model as well, because we believe it's quite good. And then the bigger change that got announced, but it's actually relatively hard to understand, and it's still quite complex on our side, is the first step in a number of things that are going to come down the line around user privacy. In this case, we are right. It's actually quite hard to explain, but it's going to be, we're going to basically for cookies, we're going to make them same site by default. And so we're going to enforce the fact that if a cookie is sent from a third-party request, whether it's an iframe embed or something similar to that, we'll automatically put the same site equals lax onto the actual cookie at that point, which basically means that the cookie won't be sent from a third party to a first party origin, to your current origin or to your current site at least, unless the developer explicitly specifies same site equals none, which means that the cookie will be sent and it will be kind of available from a third party into a first party context. However, the idea behind this is that it gives us the ability to actually understand whether there was an intentional kind of third party setting the cookie. It enables us to kind of give the user more control over which cookies are meant for things like sign up and sign in on a site, and which cookies might be meant for things like tracking as well. So there's a whole heap of changes in that space. We have a better article than I can explain it on web.dev at the moment that goes into a lot more detail about what we're doing with cookies. But there's also kind of an announcement that we made at I/O is to reduce the ability to fingerprint users inside the browser as well. And so there's going to be a lot of things that are kind of happening. And I suspect in the next 6 months when this live stream happens again, we'll have probably even more details about kind of what's happening in that space. And that's it, actually.
Thank you so much. So many exciting things happening. Somebody made a comment that they'd really like to see the what was it? The lazy images become a standard. So
yeah, it's been worked and specified, but like if you speak to Jake Archibald, actually, there's a number of things that we need to do around the rest of the loading the loading ecosystem and URL fetching. I think that needs to be fixed a little bit more inside the specification side before it lands properly on our side. So
cool. All right. So next up, I'm excited to have Riju Brata as well. I love bringing new people kind of into the fold, and Riju Brata is at Intel, And while Intel doesn't actually work on their own browser, they actually work a lot with Google and Microsoft and the W3C standards to make the web platform more capable and performant. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing, and kind of excited to hear what you have to say today. Oh, we cannot hear you, by the way. Nope, can't hear you. There we go. That worked. I heard something. Yep, I still can't hear you. Nope. Nope.
Now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry for that.
No
I'm new to this presentation. So, okay, so I'll share my screen now.
Thank you. Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so hi everyone. I am Riju from the Intel Finland office working on web platform engineering team. Quick introduction, I'm a Chromium committer and code owner in a couple of modules like generic sensors, web NFC, and one of the contributors to the media spec media capture API. In W3C, I put my editor hat on for like sensors and media related specs. So Intel is one of the top contributors to the Chrome OS platform Chromium project, V8, Web GPU, Web Platform Test, and WebGL conformance tests. We also do a lot of power and performance tests with different workloads. We participate in W3C standards and have a few editors and chairs of some working groups. So battery status API, vibration API, presentation API, Web of Things are some of the specs where Intel is contributing at in a editor capacity. Unsurprisingly, we try to contribute to unlock hardware capabilities to the web, but we are not definitely limited to just that domain. We started a community group to bring a hardware accelerated neural network inference to the web platform. So now we have an experimental Chromium implementation with promising performance improvement to unlock some use cases like object detection, semantic segmentation, and things like that. Intel is championing this next generation WebAssembly with SIMD instructions to take advantage of our CPU instructions. Intel has also contributed to the WebAssembly SIMD part of Chakra core. Google's Fugu, as Paul Kinlan had already said, is well aligned to our W3C efforts in the device and sensors working group, which we are chairing. So generic sensors are now shipping but this magnetometer and ambient light sensors are still behind a flag. We'll try to ship them soon. At present, Windows platform code for accessing sensors like work fine for Windows 7. Along with Intel's integrated sensor hub team, Microsoft have updated their firmware. Now Microsoft is planning to update the Chromium implementation on Windows 10. This will unlock additional sensor capabilities like barometer, linear accelerometer, etc. should we decide to expose them to the web platform. Intel is also upstreaming the integrated sensor hub platform to the Linux kernel. So Chrome OS will also be benefiting with the new firmware, and we can do something similar on Linux and Chrome OS. We have upstreamed the code to access proximity sensors on Android. We are looking for developer feedback. If there's a need, we can ship that. So this wake lock API provides a way to prevent the device from dimming and the locking the screen or prevent the device from going to sleep. We have been refactoring this API and implementing after incorporating some developer feedback and also taking into account newer trends in API design. So intent to ship is coming soon. Similar to WakeLock, we took our learnings from shipping the generic sensors and modernized the WebNFC API. We are now updating the implementation in Chromium. We are targeting Android as our first platform to ship WebNFC. We are targeting an early Q4 origin trial. So regarding web graphics, Intel has been championing this WebGL 2.0 compute as an interim solution until WebGPU is ready. We use this mainly for machine learning frameworks like TensorFlow.js. We have also proposed some WebGL extensions for efficient texture upload for high bit videos, so that people can manipulate the video streams on WebGL and use GPUs. With all the buzz around PWAs, where everyone now tries to make a web app, it is a bit surprising to see that there is not a good PWA camera app, mainly because native camera has more advanced controls than what is exposed to the web in the form of get user media. So I guess we'll all agree it's time to change that, right? So this is a demo of some advanced camera controls that we are bringing onto the web, like focus distance and exposure time. This demo like shows some pan, tilt, and zoom functionality on the Chrome browser. On as of now, it works on Linux and Chrome OS. So WebRTC folks have been wanting this for some time. Chrome uses a private extension to accomplish this, but hopefully soon it can be replaced by the standard compliant implementation. Intel has been making RealSense camera, which have depth sensing capabilities in addition to the normal RGB stream. We have enabled depth stream on the Chromium browser, and it is available behind a flag. So the demo on the left is a background removal, which can be used on a WebRTC calls similar to what we are having now. And on the demo on the right shows a live depth captured mesh where we can interact with virtual objects, something WebXR can use. Well, that's it for me. Hope you guys found the update useful.
Yeah, that was really amazing. I just think you never realize how much goes into making the web a better place. And it's
Yeah.
great, even if Intel isn't doing their own browser, to see all the crazy things, like all the awesome things you guys are involved in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my manager at Boku, actually, my boss man, Rick Waldron, actually was behind the generic web sensor API, and it's really great to see like you guys just like running with it. And I love how Intel. I mean, you're kind of like the champions in the IoT space for the web, really, in so many ways. It's great to see you kind of taking on the ownership of a lot of things where like the web leaves the screen. Yeah, it's super exciting.
Yeah, so I started generic sensor API with Ansi and Rick Waldron and Toby. So yeah.
No, that's great. Rick will be really happy to know that I was on this panel with you.
Yeah.
Very cool. So moving on, we have Brian, and Brian's joining us from Igalia, and he's going to be talking about the state of WebKit. And we're so excited about this because not enough people talk about stuff that is related to kind of like the stuff that WebKit is doing. So thanks, Brian, for joining us. And I see your slides are up, so feel free to start.
So you can hear me, you can see my slides. We're good to go, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, so this is the state of WebKit. If you're not familiar with WebKit, you can think of as this sort of core implementation with holes in it. And inside this lives the JavaScript core where all the fun happens. And you attach to the bottom of this OS level implementations, and then you get web views. In your browser, it's this part, the stuff in the middle. The stuff on the outside, we generally refer to as the browser Chrome. So you add the Chrome and internals, and then you have a browser. And for WebKit, when we think about browsers, we generally think about Safari on iOS and Mac. But also there is Epiphany, that's the flagship browser for the GNOME desktop on Linux. So at Igalia, where I work, we are the maintainers of the Epiphany browser, and we are active contributors to WebKit, very active. And we also do the underlying OS implementations for Linux. So the terminology that we use is this, and it just tells us where we're at in the process. And as we go through the process, things are heavily in development, and then you'll see some less things in preview and less things in release. We're not going to talk about consideration because even though it's formally on the map, it's a little bit hard to read because Apple doesn't always tip their hand there. And also contributions can come from WebKit, and then the line is sort of at inclusion underneath development. So these are things we're going to talk about and the terms we're going to use. So I'm going to give you a high level thing. I'm not going to go into all of these, but this gives you an idea of how much is currently in development. Each one of these bullets represents like an entire specification pretty much. And you'll notice that none of these include anything about the JavaScript language. But at Igalia, we're also working on adding big-in support and even optimizations for this already, which is stage 3 ECMA right now. Public and private class fields, pretty interesting. Also ECMA stage 3. Private fields provide strong encapsulation boundary, which is really cool. And then when we move to preview, that list gets smaller. And when we move into releases, we have these things. And I'm just covering this high level quick first so that I can also point out that in addition to not including JavaScript, this list don't include any of these things about the much work that goes into bug fixes and web compatibility and performance and memory use. Web Inspector, for example, has had a ton of work recently, and I'll just mention one bullet I particularly like there. Recently added support for dragging and dropping HAR archive into the network tab, which I think is a really cool and great feature. It's kind of a big thing, but it doesn't even make it into a bullet that doesn't make it into the other lists. So we're going to talk about just a couple of like high level things. They're first 2 new and shiny things that are like very early still. There's dark mode, which the CSS working group is now working on getting standardized. But the operating systems have dark mode, and some browsers consult that when they're rendering the form controls and things. So as an author of web pages, it's difficult for you to prognosticate what your web page is even going to look like. And it is also difficult for you to provide good UI and respect users' preferences. So the idea with the color schemes in dark mode is to give you a way as a author to plug into that. And then there's also the Web Share API, which is shipping, which Paul also talked about in Chrome. So I won't cover that again. But those are the new and shiny things. But coming from web development myself very recently, I want to talk about like a couple of under-celebrated wins for developers, because I know that having the new shiny things is awesome, but your day-to-day frustrations are frequently about things that are older, for example, that just aren't implemented somewhere. So we just landed input type color, which is great. I think for developers, if you need this, this is a super big win. And you see how green the can I uses for that now. Same with data list. I think that this is another feature that is part of the HTML5. The basic support has been pretty consistent across the board for a while, and we've been lagging, so we have that. Pointer events also landed. General way to reason about all of the pointy things. A single consistent API and way of thinking about it. I think that this landing is going to be really big. It's behind a flag in the latest normal release, and it is unprefixed in the current technology previews. There's also constant work going on in standards and in browsers to create self-consistency in the platform, parity and alignment, make things reasonable and consistent. So for example, recently, window.open, it effectively follows a linky thing, but it didn't have all of the characteristics of linky things. So that's now aligned, and you can add a no refer feature. Role meter, excuse me, role meter was added to ARIA recently to give it parity with HTML's meter element. That's implemented and supported. And also link preloading is in development for responsive image candidate strings. So one of the problems that we've had with responsive images is it's hard for them to work with the preloader because they don't have the information that they need. So that is currently underway. I think that's going to be good. The opposite of preloading images is another thing that Paul talked about. It's very early and there's still spec work to be done, but I think that there's like positive things there. That is currently also in development in WebKit. And Paul also mentioned that Jake Archibald had some comments on that, which is a great segue for me because I want to talk about one of Jake's slides. So if you've never seen Jake Archibald's In the Loop talk, I highly recommend it. It's a really good talk. I really like it for two reasons. One is you can see this arrow pointing to where we're doing request animation frame. He pointed out that that was incorrect, and he was correct. We were incorrect. So that is now fixed, and I think that is really good. The second reason that I like this talk, though, is that he explains the event loop really well, and he also explains why request animation frame is important. And the reason that it's important is that because before request animation frame, we didn't have the thing that we need. There is a place in the platform that does that, that understands when rendering is supposed to happen. And everything that we had before that, we were trying to like back into that through pieces of the system that didn't have the information that they needed. So this is kind of a general theme, and it's a thing that we're going to see more and more of. So I'm excited to say that Resize Observer is in preview. Resize Observer is that. It provides an efficient way to slot right into the part of the system that understands when things resize. This is a thing that you couldn't view before, like you couldn't plug into, and now you can, and that's amazing. Intersection Observer is that, but it has to do with when things intersect with effectively a scroll port. Usually it's the viewport, but it doesn't have to be. So that you can say programmatically specify that when something gets within however much space of the viewport, for example, you want to go and fetch some more JSON data and do more work, or kick off an animation, or whatever. So I've already spent a really lot of time talking, and this is just the things that are done. And as I said, these are all the things that are currently in development that would be on a future, a future state of WebKit. These are things that are currently underway, but I would like to hear what's important to you. Which things cause you pain? Where would you like to see advancements in either the web platform at large or in WebKit specifically? And how can we help? So you can find me on Twitter and let me know.
Thank you so much, Brian.
That's
Yeah, go ahead, Amal.
Oh, I have a burning question. I don't know if I can wait for this one. So if I'm correct, yeah, great work. I agree, Brian. So if I'm correct, you are implementing or what, like the lazy loading attribute is being implemented in WebKit. Is that correct, Brian?
There is work begun to implement. There are still open questions on some things that frequently happens during implementations.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess that's great news. I think for web developers, I think as like somebody who's been observing just other things in the queue for WebKit. I mean, I feel like there's things that are like actual standards that like I'm like curious like why we're implement. You know, I'm interested to hear if you have any insight into the prioritization of this feature. You know, as opposed to like some things that are for real standards, right? That have been in the queue for longer. I think.
So do you have like specific examples or?
Like, service workers.
Yeah. So there's work happening on that as well. So,
Okay.
So I think one of the things that is very complex is like how things get scheduled and why they get scheduled and what the priority is. Just like anywhere else, you have like finite resources and skill sets and people asking for things. So some of this work is being done through Igalia, and we have people who are interested in funding that development, which I think is really good thing.
That's cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Next up, we have Diego, who is going to talk about Samsung.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, can you all see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm going to be talking about a browser update from the Samsung Internet team. So since this is, I believe, the first time that we've been here, I'm going to start with the kind of nice to meet you. I'm Diego Gonzalez. I'm a product manager and the Samsung Internet web developer advocacy team. And possibly let's get the most important question out of the table, which is Samsung has a browser. And yes, we actually do have a browser. It is generally the default browser in Galaxy devices, even though it's available to lots of other devices that are based on Android L or newer. The current versions of the browser, the newest ones, are based on Chromium M67. It's not linked to firmware updates. So even though we do introduce a big change every time that we have a new device, it's not linked to the firmware updates. There are several browsers that belong to the same family. The first one is the Samsung Internet, which is this one that I'm showing here. We also have a beta version, which is where we actually test upcoming features. If you want to try some of these features and kind of get a taste of the beta itself, you can go to galaxy.store/internet beta. This one, in this case, it's the beta is for 9.4, and it's also based on M67. There's also another version of the browser, which is pretty much optimized for VR devices, specifically for the Gear VR device. So this one you can get it from the Oculus Store, but this one is based on an older version of Chromium. Still working on updating it. What's important about this is that the mobile market share that the browser has is quite big. So we are currently the third most used mobile browser worldwide. So pretty much a lot of people that are using the browser. And this is the way that I kind of want to wrap the hi. We are Samsung Internet, and we are thrilled to be here. So now I'm going to, right, one more thing, and possibly the most important one, is that we have a developer advocacy group, and we are focusing on basically, let's say, three main areas. First of all is the typical DevRel, but with a strong focus and aim in diversity and inclusion. We're also doing a lot of work with, for example, the MDN web docs, where we're part of the advisory board, and making sure that developers that are testing for the platform have the most up-to-date documentation that that they can from the upcoming releases. And we're also big contributors into standards themselves. So we are quite invested in the immersive web working group. One of our former colleagues was a person that actually worked on the service worker, on the first service worker specification. We have people that are related with web payments. We have a co-chair of the technical architecture group. And we're also participating on workshops on permissions, web VR accessibility, and the upcoming workshop on web gaming, which is going to be hosted in Microsoft. And actually, this, if anyone's interested, please let me know, because we are looking to improve the diversity of the event itself. So everyone is invited. And now I'm going to follow up with the browser update per se. Some of these features are already present in the stable, which is 9.2. Some are coming in the beta, which are 9.4. In general, the whole idea here is, that I didn't really know how further back I should go, because it's the first time that we are participating. So this is kind of like a mix of a lot of things. Possibly one of the most interesting ones that is already in the stable version is Web APK. The underlying idea is that the browser is generating and installing an APK. It's handling the updates when it's detecting a change in the manifest file. And the interesting thing is here that then we are getting PWAs that are being listed in the application drawer, in the settings, in storage, and we kind of think this is kind of like a tipping point on how users want to see really a progressive web app, indistinguishable from a native web application. This is an example of how it would look once you click on the Add to Home screen. So we could look at the Add to Home screen button as this kind of like icon that looks like a house with a plus that's right next to the URL. Once you click here, that's everything you need to do. But just to kind of like show what goes on, I put here a couple of screenshots from the notifications. You can see that you get a notification that says that it's installing the application itself, and then it gives you a notification that's installed, and that's kind of like that's how we are envisioning that PWAs are going to be installed from now on with the help of Web APK. In let's say a related feature, because here we're talking about the Add to Home screen icon. This is something that's new. It's coming in the beta, is that now the user can pretty much rename the shortcut name when they are adding it to the home screen. Basically because some websites, because of SEO and because trying to optimize their positioning in search results, then they generally tend to have longer names. The browser itself, it wasn't using the shortcut name, so now we added the possibility to actually let the user rename the shortcut as they want to. This is more or less how it looks. Once you want to add this web page, you click on, let's say, Add to Home Screen, then you're going to be prompted what's the name that you want to add it to, and then you can have your, let's say, your personalized link there in the home screen. There is support. This is not in the beta. This is actually came before in, I believe, 9.2, which is the CSS Paint API. Pretty much generating images programmatically to use in CSS properties. Something that we're actually kind of strong, we believe strongly in, is privacy, and this is why we've come for a while now with third-party blocking API, smart anti-tracking. This is pretty much done with on-device machine learning. We're keeping as well the do not track requests. And here you can see in the screenshot that you can pretty much download ad blockers, third-party ad blockers to incorporate into the browser itself. This is a, oh, and I forgot to change the screenshot there, so I'm sorry, but this is pretty much the one-off changes that is coming in the beta. The idea here is that if you long press, you can navigate in the history. And yep, here you can see how the process would look. The idea here, again, is that we are trying to refine more and more the UI ever since the launch of Samsung Internet 9.0, which was the one that shifted to the One UI. And we're kind of like making things more streamlined and easier to handle for the user. In a similar effort, we now have, this is again something new coming in the beta, a notification manager that is not only showing the notifications, but since there are a lot of websites and developers that tend to insist on wanting to ask every single permission when you go into a website, and that might be a bit annoying, then we're giving users an easy way of showing or blocking these websites right from the UI. And again, I forgot to change the screenshot. I'm very, very sorry. But it looks more or less like this. And so you can pretty much, you have now this panel in the browser where you can pretty much decide if you want to keep on allowing or just remove websites from sending you push notifications. Again, this is a feature that's coming in the beta, focused on usability in larger devices like tablets. So it's pretty much just better tab management in these tablet devices. And this is just kind of like some of the features that are coming in the latest beta, which are already joining a lot of very exciting things that we've had for a while. Service worker, progressive web apps, the whole change to One UI, WebAssembly, CSS, Flex Grid, WebVR variable fonts, and lots more. So if you're interested in knowing a bit more about the browser, and if you're specifically wanting to know about a certain feature, do let us know, either at Samsung Internet on Twitter, or in one of the URLs that you have here on the site, and we're happy to pick it up. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So moving on, we are going to have our last but not least, very excited about the stuff that Brave is doing. Samson will be giving us a quick update on Brave, and then we're going to be moving on to a really fun sort of Q&A session, and Amal brings so much amazing energy to all these questions. So I am very excited to see how the conversation goes after Samson's update. And I love this new emoji picture thing that you have here, Samson. Do you have stickers made for this?
Yes. Which one are you exactly talking about?
Oh, so I'm looking at Samson's. Oh wait, where are you, Samson? Can you hear me? You're muted, by the way.
Ah, there we go. How's that?
Good.
Excellent. So sorry about that. Let's see here. Get back. So yeah, this is the phonetic confusion that is my life. Every time I hear Samsung, I hear my name. So here I am thinking we're going to talk about the Samsung browser and how amazing it is, and it's something for gingers all across the world. And so,
yes, Samsung, do you have a sticker for your logo?
No stickers. No, unfortunately, not at this time. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. But I want to start off by first saying thank you to Tracy and Amal for hosting this, for setting this up, not just once, but this is an ongoing thing. So I would encourage anybody out there who's kind of curious of the gradual evolution of the internet by way of browsers to check out the history of videos as well. They've both done a fantastic job in the past. So thank you so much for having this again.
Yes.
My name is Samson, by the way. This is the State of Browsers 2019, and I'm representing Brave Software. We're kind of a baby project in the mix of all of the more mature projects out here. But we're really excited. We got that cubbish excitement. And so we're really eager to kind of grow in this space. What I want to talk about today is a few of the things that kind of have us excited. So the first of which is the basic attention token. For anyone who's not familiar, this is an ERC20 standard token that was built on the Ethereum blockchain. It's one of the major features of our browser. And it's a feature that we think is probably outshines many of the other ones, with the exception of one, which I'll talk about here shortly. Also, customizable tipping banners. Brave is building in a mechanism for direct consumer to creator support, so ways that you can support the website creators that you enjoy most, or content creators. improved support design. I'll talk about that. That's more of an implementation thing. The launch of Brave Ads, which is probably our piece de resistance in the browser, and the new nightly channel, which is something that's exciting. It's fairly common, as we saw with Stephanie's presentation earlier and so forth. Sync updates in the browser, rewards on Androids, and some of the work that we're doing in standards as well. So I'll jump into the very first slide, which is the attention token. So we have in the past seen this Cambrian explosion of cryptocurrencies, utility tokens, blockchain assets, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum. Everyone's heard about this stuff. And so we've seen in the past where if you wanted to acquire any of these types of assets, you had to do what was called mining, which is effectively purchasing very expensive GPUs and running up the power bill and upsetting your parents and doing all these sorts of crazy things. We've moved on to the next phase of the maturation of the blockchain economy, and now people are purchasing these assets. Well, at Brave, we think the next step is that everyone's going to be earning these assets, and primarily by means of their attention and where they pay their attention to and to whom. And so we've partnered with Coinbase to actually kind of kick off this whole thing. And so if you go to coinbase.com/earn, I'm sorry, Tracy, did you say something?
Yeah, can we so I don't think your slides are presenting properly.
Oh no.
And also what's crazy is I don't think that Google is presenting properly, because
Let's see.
I can only see my face on Google on the live stream. Can anybody in the live stream see Samson's things? Because I clicked.
See his slide deck now. Yeah.
You can see it now?
Yeah. We can see it in PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
But-
not.
Oh, but
not-
when I go full screen, you can't see. Okay, I see.
We can see your side panel of slides too. I'm not sure if that's what you intended. But
No,
the good news is that you were holding my attention without it. So
Hey,
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, well, you know what? I'll leave it like this, and let's see if I can just continue to present in the mode that you guys are seeing here. So you can see this, correct?
But you know what's absolutely crazy is we see Stephanie now and not Samson.
On the screen.
Present to everybody.
We've got representatives from all the major browsers here, and we have no idea how the internet works. Okay, let's see. I'm going to try this one more time. So I am not presenting anything, correct?
Wait, we're on the internet? This is on the internet?
The live stream is stuck on Stephanie though, which is so confusing.
Is it? Do you have her icon selected in the bottom, her preview?
No, I have you selected.
This is so bizarre. Okay, well, let's see. So everyone can see me, right? Hello, world.
Yeah, we can.
Okay,
I mean,
I'm
now
gonna-
we see Riju, but not you. At least in the live stream.
Okay. Well, I don't know what's going on there. I'm assuming it should by default switch to whoever is speaking, wherever the audio is coming from, which presumably is me right now. I'm not muted.
You broke the internet.
I broke it. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
So I'm going to go back and let's see. It says I am presenting to everyone.
Yeah, I know. But it's
And
not
it
for some
shows
reason.
my webcam. It doesn't show my desktop. I'm going to try
Well, yeah.
I'm going to do my entire screen. I'll share that and see if this works.
hey, now it looks good.
There we go. We see
Now
your
it's in
slides
presentation
perfectly.
mode even.
Excellent. Well, this is wonderful. Thank you all so much for your patience and helping
Yeah.
me out there. Okay, so let me kind of jump back. This is that brief list that I covered just a couple moments ago. The very first thing I was talking about is how we've gone from mining to buying to earning utility tokens, cryptocurrencies, blockchain assets. And so we partnered with Coinbase, which is one of the most prominent companies in this space, to actually give people their first $10 in basic attention token just for learning about the state of digital advertising and what Brave and the attention token are doing in that space. So this is pretty exciting for us. It's a nice way for people to kind of get their feet wet and get into the blockchain economy. So if we jump forward, there's the second thing I wanted to talk about, which was this customizable experience. So now we're facilitating this more direct means of support between consumer and content creator. So this is, I believe his name is Will Christensen. He's a photographer in the Seattle area. His website, The Skyfolk, I can go there now. If I love his artwork and so forth, I can send him a tip. I can select 5 BAT, which is roughly about $1.84 US, and send that. And Will gets to customize that entire experience now from publishers.basicattentiontoken.org. He sets that up, picks his imagery, picks his avatar. And so we're trying to create this more personable experience where Will gets to define what that process looks like, and not so much Brave or anybody else. And so this is a pretty exciting thing. That was one of the major steps we made more recently. We also made an implementation change in how the support is actually done. So in the past, we would actually allow people to send these tokens to any domain whatsoever, any content creator, YouTube, Twitch, all this type of stuff. And the tokens would move into an omnibus settlement wallet. And then that settlement wallet would hold those tokens until that creator verifies with the program, demonstrates ownership over their domain or their web property, and then the tokens would be released to them. Unfortunately, that could mean that some tokens would sit in a state of limbo for who knows how long. So we've re-engineered this entire thing to actually hold those tokens inside your wallet, so they never leave your browser now, and they sit in there for up to 90 days. And if and when that property becomes verified, the tokens are then transmitted out. If the property never becomes verified, then the tokens are released back inside your wallet. You can give them to somebody else. And of course, the entire process goes through the anonymized protocol so that Brave nor anybody else has any idea which websites you're visiting or to whom you are contributing support. And so we like to keep it that way. Our entire idea is can't be evil. We want to engineer things in such a way that we could not abuse your trust. And so we'll jump to the next slide here. And Brave Ads is probably the biggest, most exciting thing that I get to talk about today. And this is a re-envisioning of how digital advertisement can work on the web. It has for the last 20 plus years been the primary means by which content creators monetize their content, small websites, large websites. It has worked for everybody. Unfortunately, it has engineered itself unintentionally in many regards into what's considered surveillance capitalism. And so now at this point, there's a lot of unintended tracking, originally unintended tracking. Today, it's largely intentional, where individuals follow you around the web to learn as much about you as they possibly can so that they can monetize your traffic to a higher degree. So the more they learn about you, the better they can select ads, they get better engagement, and they make a lot more money. Brave has re-engineered this. We've inverted the model. We keep all the data on your browser. We realize that your browser actually knows a lot about you already. It knows a lot of varying degrees of sensitivity and information and context. And so you could take my phone, for instance. You could look into my bookmarks. You could see what types of things I like to do occasionally, I expect to do in the future. You could look into my history. You could see what I've done maybe once in the past. I may not ever go there again. You could look at my open tabs and see what is on my mind right now. What am I thinking about today? And all of this information is wonderful. It's stored privately on the browser, but it's largely inert. It doesn't do anything. And so what the Brave effort is we've placed a machine learning module on the browser itself. It's a completely opt-in experience. We think all this should be under the sovereignty of the user. The user gets to dictate what they do. And that model can then study the user, learn about them. Each day, a catalog is downloaded to the user's device. My computer would get the same catalog as Amal's computer, and our individual machines would churn away on that catalog. It's a large JSON file, and figure out if any of the ads that are enumerated therein are relevant to us individually. And if they are, a small operating system notification, which is shown here in the bottom right, this Turnio block card, would be displayed. And if I engage that, 70% of the ad revenue goes into my Brave wallet. So 70% in the form of those attention tokens comes to me because my attention is the limited commodity that everybody wants. I'm so special on the internet. So we've completely re-engineered this. We passed it through two testing phases, and it is now live in the browser today, which is super exciting. And so we've already seen various people. I think my first personal month was about $16 that I earned for my attention online, and none of that came at the expense of trading my privacy or my security. And I get to control when and how many ads are shown to me. It's a lovely experience, and we're going to kind of continue to develop it with user feedback and make sure it works even better in the future. We also moved to giving people earlier insight into the work that we're doing. We joined the ranks of everybody else here. We now have a nightly or a canary build, which is super exciting. So you can go to brave.com/download build-nightly and get the nightly build and start to see what it is we're doing before we ever ship it. Our build train is about a 3-week cadence. So we have the stable build that's out right now. We have the beta, which is about 3 weeks ahead of it, code-wise, commit-wise. We have the developer, which is about 6 weeks ahead of the stable, and then the nightly, which is about 9 weeks ahead of stable. And then sync is the other big thing. So we now have sync across Android, across the desktop, and iOS. So now I can have all of my bookmarks synced between these different types of devices. It all uses these QR codes, which represent these private keys that I have access to. So all the information is encrypted client side. Brave has no way to look into any of this. I just pull up my device, scan this QR code, and then all of my private bookmarks are then synced over to my other devices. And so that's a pretty exciting thing that we've been working on for quite some time. Still technically in beta on Android and iOS, but it's working really, really well. And we'll be expanding this in the future for other data types beyond just bookmarks. And then rewards, last but not least, rewards is now available on iOS. So all of that tipping ability that I can do on desktop, where I can go to a YouTube channel or a Twitch stream or a blog or a website, anything like that, I can now send these anonymous one-off contributions, or I can take part in the browser's distributed attention ledger. So as I browse the web, one of the other things the browser knows about me, I mentioned earlier about all that data that it collects locally that's privately held. It knows how often I visit certain websites and even how much time I might spend on those sites. And so what we can do at the end of the month is there on your browser can determine what proportion of your attention was spent on property A. If I'm watching JavaScript videos on YouTube, if I spend 10% of my time there, I could actually allocate a monthly contribution to all websites I visit, and 10% of that contribution would go to This.JavaScript on YouTube. And so we're bringing all that functionality to Android as well, because we've all kind of noticed the trend lines over the years. The mobile computing is where it's at. It's eclipsing desktop in many regards, and I suspect it's going to continue to do that, especially as the lines become more blurred between what is a desktop experience, what is a mobile experience or tablet experience, especially whenever we're starting to think about things like these immersive reality or augmented reality, artificial reality, that type of stuff. And so it's all going to get even more curious, and so we're eager to be bringing Brave rewards across that border into these other experiences. That's the end of it, but obviously Brave continues to work in the standard space. We talked about trust labels and membranes in the past, where with the by default right now on the web, I'm trying to see if I can jump back out of this sharing. Oh my, no, what's going on? There we go. By default, third-party JavaScript that we pull into our websites is given first-party privileges, and I know Paul talked about this to some degree in the earlier the presentation today, and so we continue to work in that area as well. We talked about recently client hints, which is a really neat spec. We would love to see things like the user agent string migrated into client hints maybe, but there's some things about client hints that give us some reservations as well, because it gives you, as Paul mentioned earlier, there's a problem with fingerprintability on the web and how much a browser knows about you and whether or not third parties can leverage that knowledge to identify you from a crowd of people. And so we want to make sure that as we progress, as we move forward to make the web a better place, that we're not doing it at the expense of user privacy or user security. So that's all for me. That's all for Brave. I want to say thank you again to Tracy and them all for running this and doing such a fantastic job all the time. And I apologize for the technical difficulties there earlier.
Yeah, this is the weirdest bug I've ever seen, ever. On a live stream. But anyways, regardless, Amal, I'll let you take it from here, and we'll just do a quick Q&A for a little bit.
Yeah, we'll try to be quick. I mean, this is like a fantastic audience to kind of really want to dive into lots of topics with. So I'll try to contain myself. So first of all, thank you so much for incredible presentations. It's really great to hear from just the full breadth of the web in many respects for major browsers. We're missing Firefox here today, but but that's okay. Can't get everybody. So I guess my first question is really just a very wide one, and I'd love whoever kind really, what does this mean for the web? Should we, as web developers, I know that there's limited attention as well from product teams as to what browsers we should be targeting, etc. I'm curious, how you've been able to kind of I would say advocate for your own browsers within the kind of ecosystem of browsers that are downstream Chromium.
Yeah, I think we've seen this in history before. Like Microsoft at one point dominated 95% of the market share, and also we've seen the the forking of browsers. Like WebKit famously has origins in KHTML, which I believe actually had both a gecko and their own one. And I think it's a mixed bag, is my opinion. It was very, very difficult after taking basically a decade sabbatical for Microsoft to come in and reboot and compete and catch up, especially with Chrome moving at kind of breakneck speed. So it has good and bad, and we have to continue to try to win people over by making a quality product and an argument that that there's value in that.
I remember, if you don't mind me, are you done, Brian? I remember years ago, back when I was long before I joined Microsoft, I was having a conversation with Chris Wilson, who's at Google now, but at that time was at Microsoft, running IE, and this was, gosh, 2008 maybe. And I remember him kind of musing about what the sort of ideal situation for the web was, and for him it was browsers not competing on standards, and browsers actually competing on features and interesting things that they're doing, and ways they can make users more productive and make the web work better for them. And I feel, largely like that's kind of the direction that we're heading. I feel like there's a lot more collaboration. I mean, if you think about how slowly standards were moving back in those days, how slowly we were getting new additions to HTML, how slowly we were getting new additions to CSS, and certainly to JavaScript as well. All of that has really picked up. There's a lot more investment. I think that, part of me being, former web standards project and really invested in the standards process, I'm very interested in, the web being a very open and just
and resilient is maybe the word you're looking for. A resilient platform.
Part of me mourns the loss of another independent rendering engine, just like I did when to Chromium. But at the same time, I think, putting my business hat on, it makes a lot of sense. And it's not like Microsoft is walking away from the table and just taking the Chromium rendering engine and saying, okay, thanks, and we're going to go off and do our own thing. I think Microsoft has shown, and this has made me happy, has shown a real commitment to actually making Chromium better, and that ultimately makes the web better and makes all of the other downstream browsers. And so our improvements will help Samsung Internet, and they'll help Brave, and they'll help all the other projects, which is good. And the fact that Chromium is an open source project, I think, is I think we're in a much better position than when IE6 was the dominant browser, as Brian was talking about, where it was a completely closed ecosystem, and Microsoft kind of threw up their hands and said the web is done, and just kind of let it sit there for a long time. So I'm excited about where the future is going, even though part of me is saddened by the fact that there's not another independent rendering engine. Sorry.
Yeah. So continuing on what Aaron said, so while I'm happy that Microsoft joined Chromium, if you're a standards guy, usually what happens is when you develop something new, for the standards to move on to candidate recommendation, you need two implementers. Now, I asked the W3C folks, and they would not consider Microsoft implementation right now, because the diversity of the rendering engine is a bit gone. So for any standard to move to the next phase, Firefox and WebKit have a kind of veto. So this might slow down the progress of a standard from incubation to shipping to the next stage. So maybe something we can take off as a discussion point.
There was a thing that I wanted to say here, that very, very early in the web's history, like in the early 90s, there were more browsers than there were websites, like very early on. And then you see like consolidation, and the fact that we have like 3 majorly different code bases is like better than that. And I think that there's like a likelihood even that this is like part of a reset. Like Chrome was, as I began saying earlier, like was WebKit, and then that forked and became Blink. And now we don't think about Blink as being WebKit, even though it has the similar origins. So it's entirely plausible that like once we have this kind of nice reset, we can, with unfortunately some bugs baked into the platform probably because of that, we can probably like broaden it again, I think.
Yeah.
I was just going to add on to that as well. Like in terms of some of the impacted developers and kind of users as well, I think the thing that we kind of need to ask the user and the developer community as well is to hold, I suppose, everyone to account in terms of building Chrome only features. That's the worry, one of the big worries, right? And I think like Google's not necessarily been a great kind of partner in that. Like there's the Chrome org, I suppose, to some extent, which is building the browser, and then there's all the kind of the products internally, which we've seen them kind of ship where it's like this feature only works in Chrome, and even when it's the Samsung browser, which is should be entirely compatible, we've done like a user agent sniff and blocked it out because we haven't done the testing on our side necessarily to have that confidence, or we've just forgot at some point. Like there's just a lot of those issues, and I feel like we do get held to account, and we don't always do the best job ourselves inside Google. I think generally we want to not see that happen across the rest of the ecosystem as well. And I feel like oh god, the light's going to go off in a second. Just give me 2 seconds. No, it's going to go off and I can't turn it back on. I feel like I do worry like longer term if the fact that the cadence of the Chrome browser, especially as more and more developers and partners kind of contribute to it, whether it's kind of Samsung, Microsoft, anyone else who's kind of contributing to the browser, that something like Firefox or WebKit starts to get left behind in terms of the kind of the core and raw capabilities that developers need. And I think to Brian's point earlier on is like there was a question earlier on about kind of prioritization. I think we have to work better with the wider community in terms of like what are the important features that developers need to be able to kind of keep leveling up the platform, because I personally, I do worry that, for instance, if we look at the Fugu capabilities that are coming through, I don't necessarily think WebKit is naturally aligned to those features. Whereas if you look at infrastructural APIs, CSS Grid, service workers, they're definitely the core things that we want consistency across the platform. And I think we also have to help the wider browser ecosystem prioritize those features as well, based off the needs of the developer ecosystem and being able to articulate that clearly, because I also don't think we do a good job there. We just say that this API is cool, you should implement it, and it's like, well, who are the customers? And I think we need to do a better job there as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I think for me, so like fantastic segue, Paul. I couldn't have paid you for a better segue. But so really a couple things here for me that were said. And I want to really go back to a point that Aaron brought up earlier, which is that, we're kind of in this interesting time where we're moving away from like browsers competing on standards to browsers competing on features, right? And I think as audience, like as the recipients of kind of this like browser like transformation, we're at the we're competing for speed, security, all these other cool things. Users are kind of, I think, getting the in many ways, like all these great features at a much faster rate. But there's also a lot of competing interests, and so there's emerging markets needs. There's users. There's needs for people on desktop devices. There's so many competing kind of like needs here, and I guess as consumers of downstream Chromium, like you especially Brave, like you're very, you're as close to the like as the green release as possible, and so you're getting a bunch of stuff whether you like it or not. But then there's also a bunch of things that you want to maybe advocate for. So I'm curious, like, how do you kind of how are folks managing all these competing needs? I guess Samson, do you want to chime in?
I'm so sorry. I was trying to figure out the technical issues over here. But you were referring to basically the migration of standards focus over to just shipping features, right? I know in Brave's case, one of the primary reasons that we're kind of pressing for with certain things is because they may be beyond the scope of particular standards. Like there's work in the web payments API that we're continuing to be involved with. But with a lot of this stuff, we've got to get something going because we're such a smaller project, and so we don't have, unfortunately, the liberty to be as maybe matched to the cadence of traditional standards development as other people can be. And so the idea is for us to kind of experiment, do things, and then bring what we learn back into the standards body discussion so that we can maybe pave a better route forward. And so we'll continue to be involved there. But there will be some things that we just put in the browser and ship. Our primary commitment is always to the user's privacy, user sovereignty, making sure they have control. And then secondarily, if we can work a lot of that back into standards for the benefit of everybody, that would be wonderful as well.
That makes sense. And I guess kind of talking about contributing back. So Stephanie and Aaron, with Edge now kind of on a whole new release model, right? Because Chromium is every 12 weeks, whatever's on trunk ships. It's a really interesting release model. So what's it been like kind of contributing to the project? Because I see you have over 400 commits, which is like awesome. But like what kinds of things have you guys been pushing into Chromium?
So I'll start, and then Aaron, if you want to chime in. Like I said before, right now we're just focused on the fundamentals and making sure that the Windows experience is really good. So we're focused on compatibility, again, accessibility. That is so big for Microsoft, and we're doing so much good work in accessibility. So at least in regards to the dev tools, I'll speak to that. We're bringing accessibility into the dev tools. So you'll be able to keyboard through your tools and use a screen reader and everything like that, which is really awesome. And then the same thing with localization. So we're bringing localization into the dev tools. I can't remember how many languages we're going to localize in, but 5?
25.
25.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Aaron, do you want to chime in with anything else?
Yeah, so I know Brian wants to jump in here too, but some of the other areas that we're getting very active in, you heard Paul mention the Project Fugu work within Chromium. That's a space that we're very interested in. Anyone who's done work with what used to be called hosted web apps and then became the Microsoft Store installed PWAs had access to a rich set of APIs. We internally refer to as WinRT, but they're basically like the Windows internals that get you access to a bunch of different things like dark mode and things like that before we had the media query for it. And we're looking to bring that functionality, some of those key APIs and some of those interesting ideas that have a lot of applicability across kind of the overall web ecosystem and across apps on different platforms. Trying to bring those to the web. So one that is in process that we've been working on for Windows, and we're doing the Mac implementation as well, is shortcuts. So for those of you who use iOS a lot, it's the force touch on an icon, or long press on Android, or right click on an icon on your desktop OS, and being able to get quick links into a particular application. I've been working on the explainer for that, along with some other folks from Google and elsewhere. And so that is coming up soon. We just got approval to merge that into the web app manifest spec. And we're working on the file system access, which is part of what Paul was talking about with Fugu. And yeah, there's a bunch of other things that we're working on doing. And I think it's kind of a nice, so, to be completely honest, we have been spending a long time as Edge in the Edge HTML world, honestly just trying to keep up with Chrome, because the reality was that so many developers were coding to Chrome as though it was the standard, right? And so that put us in a position where we were constantly racing to maintain parity with where all the developers were. And so making this move over to Chromium has really given us a chance to not have to spend so much time looking to create that compatibility. And instead, we can actually focus on what is the future, what are the features that the web needs, how do we make sure that privacy and trust are continued in that space, how do we make sure that there's a rich set of APIs to support things like progressive web apps, and how do we make sure accessibility is well served, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what's exciting for me, is we actually get to focus on the future and focus on really being user-centered and focus on the needs that our users have, and making sure that we can kind of bear those out on the web.
No, that's really great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing, Stephanie and Aaron. So I guess, the Chrome team has done a really phenomenal job of really focusing on emerging markets and kind of trying to surface out, like, what are the needs of the emerging, folks in emerging markets who are using, low powered devices and coming online for the first time, right? So, how, and their entire kind of web experience is defined by, what's available on their Android phone, and so for the health of the web, we want to have a better web experiences for them. And I'm curious now if your kind of enterprise focus is kind of bringing in some new priorities. It seems like you have a whole different set of perspectives that you're bringing into this project. So it's very exciting to hear that. I want to kind of shift over to Riju from Intel, another enterprise that's heavily involved. What are some of the agendas that you're kind of it seems like hardware and web, anything that kind of takes the web into a physical space has been your priority, but can you kind of dive in a little there?
So we started generic sensors because we had our product of integrated sensor hub, which is like a microcontroller which controls all the sensors on your phone or anything. So we started that because we wanted to showcase that on the web platform in a standards compliant way. We had some projects with NFC also similarly. We have our own WebRTC stack. That's why I focus a lot on this media work. We have our teams, at least on Linux platform. I know Linux and Chrome OS, all the firmware which goes to Chrome OS and Linux, most of them are from the Linux Intel contributors. So we have some investments in firmware for camera on Android and Chrome OS. So I try to just bubble up those kind of features to the web platform.
That's really cool. And so I guess, can you walk us through your process? Because Intel is not an implementer per se, but you are the number 1 or 2 contributors to Chromium. I don't know, after Googlers.
Maybe, yeah. Igalia is giving us good competition. Yes. Yes.
So what's the process like, though? Because you're not going to just randomly commit a new feature into a project, right? So I guess,
no.
Can you walk us through what is the process for ideation into
So we are already chairing the DAS group in W3C, Device and Sensors group. So of course, when you create some new APIs, it doesn't make sense if there are no implementers, right? So depending on business needs, and sensors had a business need that time because Intel focused a lot on IoT, these days we are focusing a lot on machine learning, because a lot of processing units on Intel are going to come up. We are trying to, at least my group is trying to facilitate those kind of workloads on the browser. So that's why we started with this machine learning on web group. Intel also has a open stack, like open WebRTC stack. So that's why we focus on media capture and these kind of things. And also media is very important because of all the codecs, those which are used, if they can take advantage of hardware acceleration. So Intel, I think the Chrome OS 95% market share right now is Intel. So we have to keep it that way. So we have to collaborate with Google and make sure Chrome OS is still works best on Intel. And Chrome OS and Chrome browser share almost, I can't give the number, but a lot of code. So that's why we are invested in those projects.
That's cool. And so I guess, and Samsung's kind of in an interesting situation as well, where you're not implementers, but you're downstream consumers, but then you also have your own wrapper. So Louise, could you tell us a little bit about like what it's like, kind of keeping up to up to date with Chrome, and what it's like kind of managing your wrapper and your priorities into kind of a pretty big moving target?
Yeah, it really depends to a lot of factors. Some of them are business decisions. Some of them are what are the features that are being currently used, what's on the market. A lot of it as well comes from developer feedback. And that was one of the reasons why we were interested in having a more direct pulse on the developer community and what were they asking for. So generally the way it goes is that we do get a lot of things that are coming with the version of Chromium that the browser implements. And then again, there are some times where some cherry picking happens, and we want to make a feature happen on something. And I can think right now of certain things that we implemented in the Gear VR, things that the spec, let's say for the final WebXR is not ready. But back in the day when it was WebVR, we wanted to try some features, see how that would play on with developers, with users. What would the acceptance be? So we can cherry pick some features, implement, and yeah, it's I guess similar to the others, with the advantage that we can kind of like take a pulse and implement some of the things that are even tied up to some hardware sensors that are on the device as well. So yeah.
No, that's really exciting. And so I guess Samsung, what's the thing that you're most excited about for the next coming year? That's like a Samsung internet browser specific feature.
Well, at the moment we are quite excited about lots of things. I wouldn't say that they're specifically Samsung internet features. They used to be back in the day, but and I'm talking, for example, immersive web. That's something that I think the whole team is kind of like a fan of VR and immersive web. But we are very excited as well for progressive web apps, all the possibilities that it's enabling. We've actually been collaborating with our friends at Microsoft in some events, and how can we tailor the message that we want to be giving to developers and make sure that the tools that they have available are great. Like, for example, the PWA builder. So yeah, it's I would say PWA, immersive web are the two big areas that we have going on. Then again, we've been shifting a lot. We started paying some attention to gaming on the web and what is necessary to make the web a good alternative for game developers. So there's a lot going on, and you're definitely going to be seeing a lot more work in those areas from the whole Samsung Internet team in collaboration with other browsers as well. So exciting times.
That's great. That's awesome. And so speaking of web developers, Paul, I want to go back to Chrome. So I think the browser that makes web developers happy for feature sets and developer tools. But so you mentioned a couple of things in your presentation, budgets, having like a budgets JSON manifest, as well as kind of some cool improvements to Lighthouse, and then Project Fugu. Did I say it correctly? Fugu. Yeah. Okay. But does it stand for anything?
It's the fish.
Okay.
From, Japan.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Got it.
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's kind of a because the fish is one of those things that if you cut it wrong, you kill somebody. So it's all those highly sensitive APIs.
Yeah, those whole things, really sensitive APIs that we need to be very careful about releasing onto the web.
Oh, yeah. No, that's so cool. So I'm glad I know what that means now. I was actually in Japan a few months ago, and I was too afraid to try the blowfish. I was like, no, I have too much living to do, yet. But so the budget.json. So Chrome kind of for me, like the Chrome. In like the initiatives that come out of the Chrome team, they kind of, for me, they spur two worlds. Sometimes it feels like something that should just be, it's a tooling problem that in the developer tool chain, like we shouldn't really be doing this. This isn't a responsibility that falls into the browser. And then sometimes it feels like, okay, cool, this is a primitive, I get it. And then there's some things that feel like more. I don't. It's not always clear to me that, for example, like budgets JSON. I'm not sure that that's a responsibility that should be on the browser at all. And so I guess can you kind of elaborate? Can you maybe elaborate on that?
I mean, the budgets JSON is for CI, like CI, basically at this point.
Okay.
So you destroy it. You deploy it that way. Sorry, but I feel like there's probably at least maybe 2 or 3 constituencies in this. Like the way that we look at it is like we know that the web and user experiences have to be kind of, if we can get them to be instant. And on multiple sides of this, there's things that we know that the browser can do to always improve. So like do you improve the rendering performance, or do you improve the JavaScript execution so that developers can do more without having to actually implement anything extra? And then there's the other side of it, which is, developers, the light's going to go off. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm actually in the HTTP 203 studio, and the lights are automatic. So and then there's the other side of things, which are, there's the other bit where it's just like there's things that we know that developers want to do but are unable to do on the platform. So can we open up the primitives that you need? So that's where the specifications kind of come in on that side of things. And then there's just other bits where it's like we know that developers are having a hard time kind of meeting the criteria that either the industry, Google, or even users kind of expect, and they're not really able to, we can't put them into the platform necessarily easily. They're not kind of primitives, and so the fact that you've got large images or you've got a lot of JavaScript isn't something that you can kind of like standardize out the way necessarily, outside of implementing kind of like features inside the platform. And so I think in the terms of like the developer relations and the developer experience group inside the team, like we want to do as much as possible to enable developers to be successful and actually navigate their way through the complexity of the web platform. It's not like the web platform is not getting simpler to build against. It's getting more complex, and it's always getting more complex at that point. And so I think it's one of the things that we're looking at is like, how do we just make it easier for developers just to do a great job on that side of things? And I think they're the three different areas that we're seeing. And so like Chrome's always going to commit to kind of making the platform faster, like say the platform, but the browser faster. We are always going to work with the standards groups to make sure that the platform is more capable in terms of those primitives. And then I think it's just on us to make sure that we are always working with the developer ecosystem so it's as easy as possible to deploy to. And so, you see tools like, Lighthouse, Puppeteer kind of coming through. And you see like web.dev. So web.dev is our website where it's like we're trying to help people step by step kind of do the right thing on the platform. And so like I think it's our team's commitment to kind of do that at that point, just because I think we know it's the right thing to do on our side, which is why we also contribute to MDN, like a number of the other people here at this group on our side, because we know that's the best resource for reference material.
That's super great.
Yeah,
MDN is a great resource.
Yeah, no, it is great that also like everyone's kind of standardized on that being the documentation for the web. So at least for web developers. Project Fugu, can we kind of just talk a little bit about how that differs from like something like Electron, for example, or is it something that's Electron adjacent in functionality, or we're basically maybe creating APIs that make it easier to interact with native the native OS? I'm just curious if you can kind of.
I mean, I can answer that from our perspective about why we started the project. It's one of those things is like Electron is definitely a great inspiration about what we know developers want to be able to do on the web platform, or they want to at least be able to do in JavaScript and HTML. And we tend to think that you should be able to access these features without having to necessarily have a large download from that side of things. And so it's like, we know that the web platform is not capable at the moment to be able to kind of deliver those types of experiences, and we just want to enable that. And so, you'll still have a need for Electron, especially if you want to package up and distribute the application, say in a store and those types of things. There'll probably be other things that you can do that you'll never be able to do on the platform, on the web platform as well, which, Electron's always a great vehicle for that. And so I think that's where the inspiration of the project came from, is just we know developers want to be able to do a lot of very advanced things. We want to enable games on the web platform. We want to try and enable productivity-based experiences to come to the web platform. And so like that was the inspiration of the project, at least, and that's why we kind of invested in that. And so I think there's a lot of stuff there. I was quite interested by the web view in Microsoft as well, because that's a really big issue that we've seen across Android with the Cordova project. It was one part of the Cordova project, and also with Electron, where you have to kind of distribute your entire like another browser with every single application that you kind of want to install, and I don't think that's what necessarily users want to do. I mean, they don't know, they just get a large download. And so I think we want to enable it so that you can just click on the link and get the experiences that you need. That was from our side, at least. I think everyone else has got different needs for Fugu from the browser side of things.
Oh, that's interesting. We'll have to watch that project. And yeah, Stephanie, I wanted to double click onto the web view, but if we talked about that, I don't think we'd have time for anyone else's questions. So we'll just have to do this again. And actually, so Samson, my last question is for you. So Brave, thank you. I will unashamedly say that it's my primary browser on mobile. So lots of bias here, lots of love coming towards me. So I'm really eager to kind of learn a little bit about this, model that you're now deploying, like on device. So I'm not actually sure if any other browsers are doing this quite yet, because I mean, we know that like you can do ML on the browser now with TensorFlow.js, but I'm not sure if like, anyone else is actively doing this is part of kind of a way to kind of synthesize and like tell a story from your own browsing history. So can you just shed a little bit of light on that as to like what were the decisions behind that? And then, it's kind of scary, but it's also like you're doing it in a way that's really respectful of people's privacy. Is there an opt-out, opt-in? Like, how does that all work?
Well, that's what, first of all, thank you so much for using Brave on your mobile device. Is that Android or iOS?
Android, but
okay.
I have to say that I have a secret project going on now where I'm just reporting I'm collecting all my bad experiences, because some sites just are broken when there's no ads.
Right.
And so there's just this weird and I have to open it in Chrome, and there's nothing wrong with Chrome. I just I just want to be able to support my content creators, and so
absolutely. So there's the primary thing that anyone that gets into content management or third-party content management, or for many people it's just ad blocking, the primary thing you run into are these false positives where you start to realize, well, third party is not always necessarily third party, right? If you look at CDNs, those are kind of third party. Those would send cookies off to companies that are completely unaffiliated with the first party. But there's other instances where, like if you go to Facebook, for instance, Facebook has their own CDN that's hosted on their own domain. It's a separate Facebook domain. It might be like fb.cdn.com or some weird thing like that. But it's an explicitly Facebook-owned property, so it should be treated like a first party. And so you'll run into these cases where scripts will get blocked because they look like they're third party. They're tripping up these heuristics. And so you have to kind of figure out, well, how can we preemptively identify these patterns, prevent them from breaking so that users like Amal don't have this terrible time using our browser on the web. And so we're doing lots of things there. We're doing some preemptively crawling the web to try and identify what types of things are breaking whenever shields are up versus shields being down, or whenever there's some of those sub shields that you see when you click on the Brave icon in the browser. And so we're trying to identify exactly what can we fix beforehand before Amal goes onto the web. And so, but back to the machine learning thing, it doesn't seem like there have been models in the past where people have tried to do some type of revenue generation from advertisements, but they've all been dramatically different. And so if you go on Wikipedia and you look at this pay to surf topic, for instance, you'll see a history in the catalog of the web, the annals of time, where different individuals have tried this differently. But up through the past 20 or so years, the focus on privacy and that conversation has been dramatically different. And so I'm loving the way things are changing today, where you see all of these major browser vendors who are now outspoken about the user sovereignty and respecting the user's privacy and wanting to make sure that we are thinking ahead, 10 steps whenever we're developing these features and the new standards and stuff like that. And so with Brave, that's what we're doing with the optional opt-in advertising model. So it's all opt-in in this case. That wasn't always the case for people who attempted to do something similar in the past. And so that machine learning module sits on your device, kind of churns away, learning about you. It's an invited relationship. So it's like if Amal and I go out to dinner or something, then we have, we've agreed that we want to share this space with one another. We want to communicate with one another. This is a private, a safe area for us to just be alone with each other, to talk about things. And so the browser is that welcomed agent. It's like your best friend. It learns about you. And now after Amal and I have hung out for a long time, I can start to trust you with making decisions on my behalf. If there's a show coming in town or a concert, you can say, you know what, I've actually, given what I know about Samson, I think I'm going to recommend that he goes and listens to Dave Matthews or something like that. And so that's all that invited relationship, which is not what we have with the current incumbent digital advertising system on the web, where it's just spread your information as far and wide to the sea of faceless third parties. You have the real-time bidding process, which auctions you off to the highest bidder in less than 100 milliseconds, several times for each page you go to. And so they learn about me kind of by the paparazzi model, where when Paris Hilton gets out of a car, there's 1,000 people watching her, taking photos of what she's eating, what shoes she's wearing. And you get to the same results where you have this high degree of insight from somebody. But Paris, to my knowledge, has never invited them to do that. Maybe she has, I don't know. But I know that I've never invited that. And so it's much better to have that invited, privacy respecting, secure, consensual relationship between me and my browser, and letting it make those decisions for me.
That's cool. It's a brave new world. Is that your tagline? If it isn't, it should be.
It's not yet, but you know what? I've got the lion tattoo and the lion emblem on the wall, so I'm represented as much as I can.
You are invested.
That's cool. All right. Well, thank you all. I rest my case here. It's exciting times.
Yeah, it was so awesome to have everybody. Again, you can find all these folks on Twitter. You can look at the YouTube channel, and I will post everybody's Twitter handle. Feel free to continue conversations there. And thank you, everybody, for joining. See you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thanks. This was fun.